Welcome to the first annual Central Minnesota Chapter Year-End Summary, a look back at the presenters, the achievements, and activities of the chapter. My name is Jason Torgerson, and I'm one of the co-chairs here at the Central Minnesota Chapter of the Climate Reality Project. Our chapter has been together for about 2 years and has a current membership of just over 200 people who are motivated to fight climate change. We have been able to maintain our goal of continued education about the nature of climate change, including potential solutions to the crisis, and hopefully we've been able to give you a bit of optimism along the way. So, let's take a look and see what we've accomplished so far, and also see what we can accomplish next. One of the hallmarks of our chapter is the ability to present educational presentations from experts and practicing professionals in the industry who have first-hand knowledge of the issues of climate change and are involved in practical solutions to global warming. Here are some of the highlights from our experts over the past year.
A lot of us have been brought up to believe that our policymakers in Washington and at the UN are going to save us through our consensus and governance. I don't think that's really true. It's markets and technology and culture that's really driving the world. The politicians are always the last step. And so I'm not thinking they're going to lead. I think they're going to follow and help amplify and accelerate what's already happening in the first place. So a lot of things that happen in our lives, like gay marriage, electing an African-American president, changes in smoking behavior, drunk driving behavior, the collapse of the Soviet Union, blah, blah, blah. Politicians didn't do most of that work. We did. Please, we all need to just roll up our sleeves, get to work. I wish we'd done it earlier as a civilization. We didn't, but we can do the best we can today, and countless people, countless generations after us will thank us for our efforts. They will not look kindly upon us sitting in our hands and saying, well, we thought it was too late, so we sort of gave up. No, that's an immoral stance. I think it's crucial that we do everything we can to pass on to the next generations the best world we can give them. And it's not the best world we inherited. Shame on us. But we have a duty to do at least the best that's physically and biologically possible today. That we can still do. And that, I believe, is a moral imperative for us to move forward with.
The people on this call are some of the smartest people on this topic. Your family and friends aren't as engaged as you are. They will listen. They should know this matters to you. Your elected officials should know it matters to you. I've been told that when one person calls an elected official's office, they're a crank. When 5 people call an elected official office, it's a groundswell. So make sure your elected officials understand that this matters to you. So for audiences who don't really care about polar bears or moose, they do care about jobs and they do care about lost economic opportunities. And to the extent that the US is slow to maximize our green energy production, we will suffer economically because other countries are filling the void.
90 to 95% of the actual silicon wafer supply is coming from China, and particularly Western China, and all the human rights issues that are happening there is a big issue. It's an issue with just about anything related to minerals and electronics these days. We need to figure out a solution to it. I think the one thing that is helpful is that there's not a lot materially or technologically that prevents you from doing it better in a sustainable way, because the vast majority is like silicon, aluminum, basically highly abundant minerals and elements. We just need to find fairer and better ways to manufacture them and process them.
And this is one special thing that I learned when I was at the climate conference in Glasgow, because I went to hear President Biden on November 1, and he said, and I'm bringing you something that the US and the EU have been working on for the last year. We have established a global methane pact, and over 100 countries are now in that pact, and we are all committed to, by 2030, cutting our methane emissions by 30%. And the agreement in the legislation is that at first, all utilities will double their investments in low-income household and community in energy efficiency. First, double it, and then they will triple it. So that was a really good bipartisan victory.
The electric power sector is decarbonizing. It needs to happen more and faster, but I think it's on its way. We know kind of how it's happening. We have a sense with transportation how to do it, with getting people out of their cars and electrifying transportation. Still a ton of work to do, but we kind of know how. And building decarbonization and industrial sector decarbonization is, I think there's a ton of work happening on it right now. The way I think about it is conservation and efficiency, like making our homes and our buildings as efficient as possible. Like ramping up weatherization assistance is super helpful with reducing natural gas, because natural gas is used for heating. And then we need to electrify everything possible within homes. So dryers, gas stoves, water heaters, and heat pumps. And heat pump technology, from what I understand in my reading, is significantly improving. So if you have a good building envelope in a cold climate, a heat pump is a much more reasonable, effective thing now than it was maybe just a few years ago.
A lot of ecologists are pushing to set aside all of that intact forest there as wildland reserves, and we made some progress with Wabakimi, which is a 5 million acre, and there's a couple of those in Quebec now, and northern Saskatchewan, northern Manitoba, northern Alberta. And so there are a number of big nature reserves being set aside in those areas. And believe it or not, Vladimir Putin, who I generally don't like, has set aside the 5 million acre Komi Virgin Forest in the Ural Mountains, which has never been logged as a strict nature reserve. Like, people aren't even allowed to go off of the road there. It's what they call a strict nature reserve in Russia.
Our system of solutions is kind of like a suite of solutions asking the question, is it possible with all the climate solutions that we have at hand to date to address climate change and start drawing down emissions, and is it financially viable, and what are the technologies that are available today? There's a lot of conversations around carbon capture and funding those types of technologies, but those, if and when they're implemented, the technology isn't there to be able to do so at scale right now. So that would have to be kind of at the tail end of, like, we've implemented all these other solutions, like that's kind of a last resort solution to implement. So we're looking at really which solutions we need to implement first, where and how. And there's obviously a ton of barriers even in implementing a solution in a specific community here and abroad.
River cleanups are another great place to get people to understand. So I bring designers on a river cleanup, get them to volunteer for river cleanup stuff. That's actually one of my personal epiphanies. Was I was in Aruba, and I was on the windward shore. So that's the side that the wind is blowing towards, and that's directly from the US down to Aruba. And it was basically nothing but packages and flip-flops. I don't understand how many people lose flip-flops. The packaging I almost understand. But as I was walking along the beach, I was looking around for stuff that I had designed and stuff that my colleagues had designed, because I was going to photograph it and say, hey, dude, I was checking out your portfolio. And, that's in thinking that, maybe this is the first time somebody's seeing my work. So it was pretty powerful, as you start to see the impacts of your actions.
The artists are relatively good at communicating values and vision. And so we helped through the last 20 years make protests more visually, appealing. So what we'll do now is we will either lend imagery or connect artists in communities, or maybe even more almost, I hate to use the word, but kind of propagandistic, like how do you leverage the energy of a few people and make it reach way more folks for little money, and things like, so overpass bannering, we use deer fencing, and we send out banner toolkits to folks. We teach people, we've sent over 60 spotlights. So you've probably seen projections of messages onto buildings. Well, that's from Backbone Campaign 90% of the time. And so that's the kind of thing, is teaching people how to translate their vision and their values into actions that only take a few people. And during COVID, what was an advantage is those were often very COVID safe actions.
And I like this quote: "The future is up for grabs. It belongs to any and all who will take the risk and accept the responsibility of consciously creating the future they want." So let's go forth tonight and think about the future we want and see how we can seize that and begin to bend some curves into a better direction, or have a more sustainable future, but also a kinder, more just, and more equitable future for all of us, and how we can do that and all take some responsibility for making the future we want together.
Fighting climate change is a marathon, not a sprint. Each achievement brings us closer to mitigating the impacts of climate change, as well as blunting the degree to which global warming will continue into the future. So it's important to keep track of the victories as well as planning future initiatives. Here are a few of the achievements of this past year. Of course, one of the most significant achievements of this year comes from the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes many provisions that address issues related to climate change. According to an analysis from Politico, the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act will accelerate U.S. emission cuts and put the country on a path to reduce greenhouse gases by 40% below 2005 levels by the year 2030. We also saw more concrete actions that will address global warming. Coal-fired power plants are one of the worst polluters and contributors of greenhouse gas emissions, and the pace of closures for existing coal-fired plants continued in 2022. Minnesota Power announced an agreement to close its remaining coal-fueled plants by 2035. And in a report by the Energy Information Administration, almost 12,000 megawatts of coal-fired capacity will be retired across 2022 if reported retirements proceed as scheduled through the end of this year. No new coal-fired capacity is being built in the United States. In addition to emissions reduction, we also saw other bills passed to address issues of air and water quality, as well as the impact of climate change on understudied urban populations. In September, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill including sweeping measures to address climate change. Titled the California Climate Commitment, the $54 billion investment will cut air pollution, reduce state oil consumption, and cut refinery pollution by 94%. Colorado passed several bills this year which address air and water quality, building code updates to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, and the establishment of funds to assist with the transition away from fossil fuels for communities that have coal-based economies. And in September, the U.S. Department of Energy announced it has awarded $25 million for the establishment of an urban integrated field laboratory in Chicago. The award will advance the study of climate change at local and regional levels. Alice Walker, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer and social activist, once said that activism is my rent for living on the planet. Everyone who's already in this chapter is part of a historical journey to tackle what is likely the greatest challenge our planetary civilization has ever faced. We know that many of you have multiple commitments to fighting climate change and preserving the environment, so thanks to you for your contributions to this movement. We look forward to what we can accomplish next. Another author, James Baldwin, once wrote, "Those who say it can't be done are usually interrupted by those who are doing it." On behalf of the leadership team here at the Central Minnesota chapter of the Climate Reality Project, thanks for watching.
My next big project around here, and I had a guy come out, give me a flat bid.
So if you have any place to put a tree or two in your own yard, I think we all should keep that in mind.
The work that many people have been doing in the city of Minneapolis around what we originally called the Minneapolis Green New Deal.
Jedlichka. Yep. Now you've just said your second word in Czech.
We should be passing our climate emergency declaration in about a month's time, and then going to work on a climate action plan. But man, so much has already...
Little teeny suburbs like Falcon Heights have been very active, and then there's other suburbs.
My daughter actually helped me. My daughter was 8 years old at the time, and I enlisted her help to do this little experiment.
I was on the environmental committee here in Plymouth that wrote the proposal.
Windy before, huh?
I have. Is Money on the chat yet?
From a camp. So you're putting two items together that shouldn't be together. So when they get
gamifies climate action a bit, but it gives everyone kind of a little bit.
Excel as a template for, or a hold up Excel comparing
streetcars on Hennepin, and I don't know if that's dead or.
Quick comment on streetcars. My grandfather.
If it would be more efficient if it was under one ownership.
I'll tell you, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.